Oh, there's John. Hi, John,
Hey.
welcome.
You guys look good in person.
How would you know?
Oh, I'll do that.
So I can share.
All you gotta do is.
Oh, that's it? Oh,
Look, I'm like, I can do that.
yeah, it's fine.
No fighting over the controls for the meeting.
No, it's just, she said she didn't know how to get the PowerPoint to be the, and I was like, oh, I do. All you do is press a button. I could have told her that. So we're still missing Joe Hoffner.
And Deborah.
Is Deborah gonna join?
She's at the beginning, yes.
Oh, okay.
Supposed to. There's Khalil. Welcome.
Oh, I accidentally made Carolyn part of the panel. She's not ex officio. Okay.
Oh, I thought she was.
No, Khalil is.
Oh, my God. Karen probably is going on.
1 minute. Glenn, do you know any reason why Deborah isn't coming?
Did you talk with her? She should be in.
I guess I should announce it anyway, right? Madam City Manager, ready to roll?
Yeah, I was just looking to see if Joe Hoffner is coming in, but I do not see him.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock on July 13th. This is a public hearing of the Lewes Planning Commission. The order of business is presentation and public hearing regarding the Fishers Cove Major Subdivision for creation of 18 single-family lots and site improvements to be located off Rodney Avenue, zoned R2, Sussex County Tax Map 335-4.00-15.00. The Commission is considering the Fishers Cove Major Subdivision application following a remand from Mayor and City Council. Following tonight's meeting, the Commission will consider the application further at its next meeting. No decisions, I repeat, no decisions have been made about the application by the Commission. No opinions have been expressed, no votes have been taken, no decisions have been made, and none will be made until the process is completed. Within 90 days after the public hearing tonight, the Commission will make its recommendation to Mayor and City Council in accordance with Lewes Code Chapter 170, Paragraph 19F. Out of abundance of caution, two commissioners would like to make a statement at this point. I turn to Commissioner Stacy first.
Thank you. It is out of an abundance of caution, and despite being fully confident that I could be fair and balanced in reviewing this matter, I'm recusing myself. And I'm recusing myself because of a previous contact with the neighbors organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your stepping up, and thank you for being out of abundance of caution on the side of Angels. I would also report, since I don't see Commissioner Ewalt's here, that she is also recusing herself and will probably be able to make a statement later on. Tonight is the first step in the process under Lewes Code Chapter 170, Paragraph 19E. It is a public hearing, and it is being conducted in accordance with the new law governing public meetings after the governor's emergency orders were lifted at 12:01 this morning. It is a hybrid meeting, both in person and online. The officers of the LPC, the Vice Chair Melanie Mosier to my left, and Secretary Sumner Crosby are here with me in council chambers, accompanied by our city solicitor, the city manager, and our city planner. Other commissioners are online with us. The goal tonight is to receive comments from interested parties. This is not an opportunity, however, for questions and answers. They will not be entertained during tonight's meetings. Questions may be asked, placed on the record, but we will not be answering them tonight. The regular August meeting of the LPC will be the opportunity for such question and answers from the commissioners. However, the public record will remain open until close of business Friday, July 30th. Any interested party is encouraged to submit comments to the city, which will be posted on the city's website and available to any interested party. In particular, I invite the commissioners to submit questions or issues they have to the city planner, Janelle Cornwell, so that she might contact the appropriate party to get such answers and information available at the commission's next meeting. Rest assured, everyone, that no commissioner has been or will be in direct contact with the applicant or anyone about the merits of this application. All of our deliberations will be in the public eye. In fairness to all interested parties, the following rules will be adhered to in tonight's public hearing. The applicant and/or his representatives will be given 20 minutes to supplement the record, which is in addition to the material presented for 30 minutes or so at the Commission's June regular meeting. Following the applicant's presentation, the attorney for the concerned citizens will be given 20 minutes to present their information. Then individuals will be given 5 minutes each to present their information to the Commission. This is more than case law requires, which is just 3 minutes, but since there are so many interested parties and many have developed formal presentations, I want to give them a fair chance to make their case to the Commission. However, I urge everyone to address the specifics of the application succinctly and pointedly. If you want to speak, but you will be repeating what others have said, please just endorse or adopt what's been said so we can hear from as many folks as possible. The remand from Mayor and City Council focused on 3 areas. Janelle, would you please summarize those areas for everyone's benefit?
Thank you.
Thank you, I'd be happy to.
Before we do it,
Oh, go.
Mr. Chair, I see that Ms. Ewald is on now. Would you like to give her an opportunity to?
Yeah, Commissioner Ewald, would you like to make a statement? You're on mute. There you go.
I'm going to leave the meeting just as be an observer. I have been asked to recuse and have honored that request to try to protect the city and the planning commission's integrity.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it, and we'll look forward to you rejoining us for other matters in the near future. But thank you very much for taking that step on behalf of the city. Janelle?
Thank you. So
the main items that were remanded back to the Planning Commission for Mayor and Council regarded stormwater management, the AECom flood model, the Sussex Conservation District review, which is a review regarding stormwater management, improvements to Rodney Avenue, and the topography changes in the use of fill and the removal of soils. The applicant has provided an updated stormwater management plan that has been reviewed and approved by the Sussex Conservation District. As part of their review, they did go through and redo the AECom flood model. AECom provided 2 plans, maps, showing based on the information requested, based on the development, that the applicant did use that when they were working on their stormwater management. The applicant has also proposed widening of Rodney Avenue along with drainage along the sides, and they have noted that they have no net fill regarding fill in the floodplain. So they have addressed, they have identified items regarding the application based on the remand from the mayor and council. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have regarding those items.
All right, unless any commissioner, the 2 officers here or those who are on camera with us, wish to make a comment or ask a procedural question, I'm ready to invite the applicant's team to begin. Do I hear any questions from the commissioners? I see smiles, but no questions. All right. Can we call up the applicant's team then, please? Anne Marie?
Yes. So, there they are. Christine's getting the PowerPoint up. There we go.
Janelle, will you keep time, Flores, please?
Yes.
I see a room full of people, but I can't really see who they are from this distance.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Tim Willard. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Tim, would you introduce those that are with you, please?
Yeah, that's what I first planned to do, and I'm going to back this up here so you can see. In the blue shirt to my left over here is Steve Gorski. He's with Duffield. Right here is Jeff Bross. He's an engineer also with Duffield. Over here is John Horner, who's co-counsel with me. Sean Tucker, co-counsel with me. And I don't know if I can do this. There's Mr. Healy over there in the corner. We put him in the corner. And your group, the three of you in council have disappeared from my screen, I guess, because the PowerPoint is up. Maybe you could hit that down, John. So you can see him right here. So, the first thing I'd like to say is, I've introduced everybody. We know what this is. It's a remand. We intend to focus on those. Since you just indicated that our prior presentation, which was an introduction of what we did, is part of the record. We were going to go through that with some more detail. We'll do that rather quickly. And then after that, we intend to comment on the concerned citizens' submissions. We submitted our PowerPoint a week ago. We just received yesterday at 9:30 some opposition PowerPoint presentation from Ms. Jordan and Ms. Pinto, and then at 11:50 it looks like Mr. Rodunda's presentation. When Mr. Mandalis emailed me last week, he indicated that we would be, I think he used the term approximately held to 20 minutes. In light of everything that was provided to us in short notice, it seems like an extraordinarily limited amount of time to try to deal with all the opposition comments, a lot of which is misleading, untrue, and inaccurate. We're going to do our best to touch on it within your time limits. We hope, Mr. Chairman, that you give us a little indulgence if we go a little bit over on that.
Mr. Willard, let me remind you of two things, please. Number one, you can submit any additional matters for the record up through the end of the month, Friday, July 30th. More importantly, you will be at the meeting next month, which I believe is the 21st, if I remember correctly, of August. I'm not sure about that, but it is the third Wednesday of the month, and we will be able to ask you questions or find additional information if we need to at that time. But I appreciate the fact that you may have a lot more you would wish to put on the record tonight, but indeed, this is the public hearing. This is the intent to get the public's comments in. We're giving you the courtesy of letting you go first, and I hope you can accomplish most of what you want in the 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and we will move forward. We fully intend to submit a written presentation. I just think in light of what the public has already expressed, it's worthy to respond in a public setting as well. So we'll do the best we can, and we do intend to submit a written submission. So at first, let me just ask these two gentlemen to my, and can you see them, the two engineers to my left?
Yes.
Steve Gorski. To the extent you're going to be asked some questions as we go through our presentation, can you just tell the commission a little bit about your background and experience?
Yeah, I'm a civil engineer with Duffield Associates, as Tim mentioned. I've got 35 years of experience in land development, stormwater management, road design, and floodplain modeling. That's about it.
Okay, and Jeff?
Yes, my name is Jeff Bross. I'm a registered professional engineer in Delaware and several other states with Duffield Associates. I've been a practicing engineer for well over 40 years, and my expertise is in modeling flood studies, drainage studies, and coastal protection, amongst other things.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to go through the PowerPoint, and we can go to next slide. Am I going to be talking to Janelle, if you don't mind, Janelle, about the slides?
Yep, go ahead.
Next slide, please. Jeff, what are we looking at there? That's site plan. Can you tell the commission just generally how that, and the people who are listening and out there, how this maybe has been changed since what was in general?
Yes, yeah, real quickly. We've realigned Apache Way to be a little bit better entrance transition. We have eliminated some impervious areas consistent with recommendations in the AECom report. We shortened the Jack's Way. We eliminated some sidewalk that really doesn't serve any purpose. And the lots that abut the University of Delaware at the top of your screen, we narrowed those. They still are all code compliant, to provide room for additional stormwater management. And our road widths we reduced again in the interest of trying to minimize impervious surfaces to 24 feet.
Next slide, please. And this is just the letter from Ms. Cornwell outlining the 5 comments, the Stormwater, Acom, Soil Conservation District, Rodney Street, and Topography, which we're going to address one by one. Next slide, please.
Want me to pick it up here?
Sure, yeah. What did the Mayor and Council ask us to do?
Yes, basically these are the remand comments, and we have addressed them individually, and I'll try and be quick and move through these without rereading them. I think Ms. Cornwell did a nice job summarizing. Basically, we've got three issues: stormwater management, the AECOM report, actually maybe 4, the grading changes in the floodplain, and the other issue is the Sussex Conservation District stormwater management. So the first one was identify stormwater management system, which we're going to show you and should verify that the system will work, and it addresses flooding for the development parcels and the adjacent parcels. Next slide. Next slide. And this is the grading plan for the stormwater management system. It's a little hard to see on this particular slide, but there are basically 2 wet ponds to your left. There's a dry pond in the center of Tyler's Circle, and there are piping systems and swale systems, swales along the rear yards of the on our property adjacent to the Rodney Avenue homes, and then there's actually a stormwater piping system that's also represented here.
Next slide, please. And you may recall, Commission, that you had a larger flood study done for the whole area in here, and part of that was Fishers Cove. And then Mayor and Council asked that the numbers be run on, more specifically on Fishers Cove project with AECOM. Although this isn't a code requirement, we agreed to go along with this to move things along, but not waiving what the code requirements are. Let me ask you this, Steve. You see what the council and the mayor asked for, that we used actual numbers from the development and use them into consideration. Did you share with AECOM the numbers? The slide has disappeared. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the next slide would be helpful too.
Pause our time, please.
Janelle, you there?
Yep,
They're working on it too.
Oh, sorry about that. It could very well be something I did.
I paused the timer.
So, yeah, about the numbers, Steve, we're going to keep moving forward, but we would like that next slide to come up if possible. What kind of numbers did you share with AECOM?
Yeah, we provided all of our CAD files, which included existing conditions, topography, plus our proposed grading for the site, as well as our storm management facility design, our storm drain pipes sizes and slopes, and inlet elevations at all locations.
And did you work with AECOM once they received the numbers? Did they receive your whole CAD file too?
They did. They got all the CAD numbers. We went through several iterations with them to help improve the models that they were sharing with us, the surge models, the 2 particular ones that they singled out.
All right, next, can you get that next slide?
Yeah, I actually showed
Yeah, we're not even on the right slide.
Yeah, there we go.
So just briefly summarize, those were all your contacts with AECOM on those dates?
Yeah, it went started in December and marched all the way through mid to late April to get to a point where we're satisfied, and they were satisfied that we improved the surge situation considerably.
And they ran 2 models, and that was the sum and everything of their report, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and what's the next? Maybe Jeff, you can look at.
Yeah, real quickly, I had mentioned, and one of the suggestions was that we follow the recommendations that begin on page 31 of the AECOM study. One of those recommendations is to reduce impervious surfaces, and I think I mentioned it briefly before. You can see on this particular slide in yellow the sidewalk reduction around Tyler's Circle and on Jack's Way. Those sidewalks don't abut any properties, and there are sidewalks on the other side. and they truly are redundant impervious surfaces that don't serve a purpose. So we've eliminated them and certainly are asking for a waiver for that purpose. We also shortened Jack's Way, again, to provide more room for stormwater management and to reduce impervious surfaces, and remove the sidewalk along Jack's Way on the side of the street that's not occupied.
Next slide, please. I'm sorry, were you done, Jeff?
Yes.
Next slide. Yeah, let me just take this. You can see that the mayor and council asked that we review the stormwater management plan for reconsideration and consent with Soil Conservation District. That too was not really a code requirement. We had contacted them before. So we have, and if you go to the next plan, or the next slide, please. That's been approved, which is a little unprecedented at this stage of a preliminary consent. They've approved our stormwater plan. Next slide, please.
Well, then this is a copy of the stamped stormwater plan as well.
Yeah, the slide before was the approval letter. That's the stamped copy. So we've given code plus. Next slide, please. We've provided, the mayor and council asked for improvements which should be made on Rodney. We've recommended the 24 feet, which is the minimal. There's some debate about, or there's been confusion about whether Rodney should be the access, and the concerned citizens want to avoid it, but it's absolutely the legal access. Next slide, please. There's the deed granting a right of way for Rodney. There's the law, which says that those streets should be used, or that's what the deed says, the street should be used as public street, and they should be connected. So you can't have a landlocked parcel, and this is the access to it. Now, next slide, please. So what we've recommended, Jeff will talk about. Next slide, please. So there. Yeah.
So working with city staff, we sought to find an upgrade to Rodney that was not only safe, but also minimize the aesthetic impact. You'll note in this particular slide, there's no real stormwater management in terms of drainage on Rodney right now. And as you'll see later, there are a number of encroachments already that have occurred. The proposal we're making, Janelle, next slide, please. And again, this is our suggestion, and we think it accomplishes both the safe and aesthetic issues that I addressed earlier. We're proposing a 3-foot widening on either side, and then a 2-inch overlay across the entire widened section, with some minimal drainage swales on either side of the road. Again, since there are no drainage swales right now, to provide positive drainage. These would be mowable. I mean, they'd be turfed, grass. They look just like the lawns now, but provide some positive drainage.
There was a letter to the editor that likened them to like ditches next to new road. Would it be anything like that?
Not at all. That's not a totally unfair comparison. This is, as I say, going to be turfed swales. You can cut the grass, but it provides its minimum amount of drainage so that it doesn't impact the residents.
Next slide. I'm sorry, Jeff. Next slide. And this was the topography, and I think this is to you, Steve, as far as net fill.
Yeah, we ran models for the floodplain fill. There's a comment about achieving a net zero impact, and we achieved that. Again, that was based on recommendations and also new code. We matched the cuts in the stormwater areas and with the fills, and again, that's all in the floodplain only. There was additional fill, but that's all that you'll see in a future slide by the opposition. That is actually fill that occurs above and beyond the floodplain.
Next slide, please.
And maybe just to drive that,
go ahead.
Just to drive that point home, there is no net fill in the flood zone.
Next slide. The feedback we got a little bit from the last phase was, the main feedback was concerned with flooding. And all of you probably on the commission are familiar with seller's disclosure, which is an important document that every seller fills out. And if they're not accurate, they could face some liability. And what we did research about 25 sales recently in Rodney, Hornkill, Harborview, and Polytown. And 24 out of 25 indicated the questions, are there any drainage or flood problems affecting the property? The answer was no. There were no flood problems. Does the property have standing water after 48 hours of a heavy rain? And the answer was no. I have all those disclosures, but the next slide will show sort of a map of where those properties are.
The 25th was exempt.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there were, 24 out of 25, there's no report of flooding problems in those homes that are starred there, and I will submit the disclosures so you'll have them. The 25th one was that they were exempt, they didn't have to. So could we go to the final slide? So I'm not used to these presentations being restricted in such time. I am if I'm arguing with the Supreme Court. I've kept track of time so far, and I think I'm at about 12 minutes, maybe 2 minutes was the fact that the slide wasn't up. So if we could have another 15 minutes, I'm going to turn it over to John Horner.
If you could please pull up Mr. Redunda's presentation.
Let me get you on that.
The presentation is up.
I'm still seeing the old presentation.
Muted.
So while she's pulling this up, we're going to take these last few minutes that we have to address, even though we've only had about 24 hours to look at these presentations. There's just so many outright falsehoods, misinformations, and frankly blatantly lies in these that we thought a good use of our time was to address some of these points specifically. So if you could please go to slide 12 of this presentation. So first, it's important to note the opposition argues that SCD approval does not equal compliance with the City of Lewes zoning ordinance or comp plan. And in doing so, they specifically cite code sections 19773A2. What is important to note here, and it's kind of shocking that an attorney would proffer this as the code sections, 19773A2 is the statement of purpose for which the regulations are passed. That is not the regulations. It's akin to a statement of purpose might say, hey, the statement of purpose for this law is to minimize vehicular accidents. The regulation says, hey, there's a 55-mile-per-hour speed limit, and this would be saying somebody who's going 50 miles per hour is violating the ordinance because they aren't minimizing motor vehicle accidents. Important to note that those are not the actual regulations. That's the statement of purpose for which the regulations were passed. Throughout this entire presentation, the actual regulations that we are required to comply to, there's only one reference where they claim that we have not met those, and we'll address that head on. If you could, please go to slide 15. Specifically, again here, all of these things are in the statement of purpose. This is not the regulations that we are required to comply to. Again, the standard is the code, not the statement of purpose. It's actually the proffered regulations. If you could, please go to the next slide. So this is the only section that actually references a regulation that we are allegedly violating, but this slide is beyond misleading, and in fact, I'd argue it's frankly beyond the pale to put this up in this way. The actual regulation, if you go to 19773E3, does not say this at all. In fact, it says development in floodways is permitted, provided analysis demonstrates, and I am paraphrasing in the interest of time, but not, I'm putting in the actual language quoting it. The proposed development activity may be permitted if the analysis demonstrates that the activity will not result in an increase to the base flood elevation. Steve or Jeff, can you confirm that that is accurate?
That is accurate.
Again, this is the only time they cite a regulation where we've supposedly not complied. And here I'm telling you from a registered professional engineer, we do comply. That is another important thing to note. Throughout all of these presentations by both the applicants, or the opposition's attorney, as well as the opposition, there is not one registered professional engineer that has weighed in any of these presentations. And to our knowledge, the only registered professional engineers that have reviewed these plans are our engineers here, GMB for the city, SCD, and Acom. If you could please go to slide 17. Again, this does cite the comp plan, but this is not the regulation. This is, if you read the comp plan, it says, hey, the regulations are enacted in order to meet this goal. This is not the regulation. If you go to slide 18, please. This is completely, again, blatantly wrong. These provisions have been thoroughly analyzed. They have been responded. Jeff, can you confirm that you have analyzed these and that the record states these have been analyzed?
Yes, our engineers have in fact analyzed these.
Correct. And additionally, the city engineer has analyzed provisions. They prepared a certified report which states the submission was reviewed in adherence to the preliminary consent procedure for a major subdivision in the city code, specifically section 170-19 paragraph D, and generally accepted engineering principles. Important to note, 170-19 D5 is where the city engineer certifies that the conceptual plat plan is complete and in full accordance with the subdivision regulations as well as fits with the plan for orderly development of the city. So this argument that nobody's analyzed it is just completely wrong and untrue. It's been analyzed by our engineers, it's been analyzed by the city engineer. Next slide, please. Again, citing non-code provisions, and we explain why these are blatantly false. Next slide, please. Retaining wall. The idea, again, they go back to the statement of purpose, not the regulations. The idea that you can never divert water ever would make any development impossible. If you put a house down, by nature, the water is going to deflect off the house. You can't do it. Again, that's why we have regulations that are based on a statement of purpose. The question was proper. The retaining wall prevents storm surge from entering the floodplain. Is that true, Jeff and Steve?
That is true. Yeah, there's a slot in the retaining wall.
It does not prevent it. Sorry, it says it prevents storm surge from entering the floodplain.
It does not prevent it.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Let me be clear. Can you go to slide 23, please? The question was asked: what happened to stormwater? What happens when stormwater management ponds fill from a storm? Jeff or Steve, if you could weigh in very quickly.
Yeah, well, the purpose for the stormwater management ponds is in fact to fill with storms. I mean, that's their purpose. But again, it's taken into account. All this is taken into account when you assess the impact on the flood levels, the base flood elevations. So again, it really is, it's kind of a nonsensical question from a non-technical person.
Right, and that the record from the opposition is replete with questions from lay people that don't have an engineering or legal background, and that's why we're trying to point through some of these issues. The question is who's going to maintain the stormwater management system. This issue has come up multiple times. It'll be maintained by the HOA, and with a little bit of time at the end, I'll touch a little more on that. The stormwater management system will be inspected by SCD on an annual basis, as is everything else in the county. Slide 25, please. We already talked a lot about Acom, so I'm going to just go ahead and skip this because we're in the interest of time. Slide 29, please. It's important to note here, they kind of attack the city's engineer here by saying GMB does not reference the Acom final report. There's a very good reason for that. Acom is not the legal standard. The legal standard is the regulations and the code. It's what SCD is. That is the legal standard. The idea that Acom report and the flood study contained therein is the legal standard is a complete falsehood. And so understandably, the city engineer does not cite that as a basis for approval. The idea that GMB does not state the development plan complies, as I stated earlier, the section with 170-19 paragraph D, the city's engineer's letter, does in fact do exactly that. Says GMB does not address flood storage capacity. Again, that may be the case at this point in time, but they will have final approvals where they do that. But it's also been looked at by our engineers, looked at by Acom, and also looked at by SCD. But specifically though, GMB had to say that this: the applicant's engineers' revisions to the plan have ensured that all development lots and properties are provided with a drainage system that is adequate to prevent the undue retention of surface water on the site. Slide 38, please. We touched, has to do with fill, and Steve, I think Steve and Jeff hit this clearly. There is zero net fill in the floodplain. We have never claimed zero net fill across the site. It is zero net fill in the floodplain. If we could go back to slide 32. This has to do with Rodney Avenue. They are claiming that we want to widen Rodney Avenue to 26 feet. It is 24 feet. The only portions that are 26 feet are actually located within the Fishers Cove property as you transition to curb. The 2-inch overlay on existing road is in fact compliant with the code. In fact, the city's engineer confirms as much when they say they met with us, and the initial concepts are generally acceptable from an engineering standpoint. We're not sure where they got that it wasn't. Next slide, please. If you look at the second point of this, the emergency access is not just for the Fishers project. If you look at Rodney Avenue, it is overly narrow. It does not allow for easy passage of emergency vehicles. If there were a fire towards the back of the property, people would be unable to get there. And the idea that the 20-foot easement is the only access, that sort of Fishers Cove would be protected by that. The residents of Rodney are not. If you could go to the next slide, please. And now this is where we get into more falsehoods here. There was no intentional landlocking of the property. The properties were at all times, the Fisher House and the Fishers Cove property, listed as two separate properties sold in two separate transactions. The Fishers Cove property always had historic access to Rodney Avenue. And beyond that, the city's own engineer, when we went for the minor subdivision plan, confirmed that it was impossible to have a legal conforming road through the Fisher House parcel. So the idea that we had to access that parcel through the Fisher House was impossible to legally do. We did not make anything worse. It was impossible to do. The idea that we have not provided adequate legal authority that they can use Rodney Avenue is insanity to me. Not only have we provided a deed for the right-of-way, we've cited specific code provisions. There's historic access to Rodney Avenue from the property at the end of the road. And beyond that, we've also cited case law, specifically the Rehoboth first judge case that we have put before the Planning Commission multiple times, that states you have a right to access the property. So if you could at this time, please switch to the opposition's presentation, and this will be very brief. There's only I believe three slides to touch on here. Slide 15 in the opposition's presentation.
Mr. Willard, we're going to give you about 3 more minutes because you're over 20 minutes already. And I don't want your colleague to be frustrated by talking so fast, so we'll give you 3 more minutes.
I'm running out of breath over here.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. This is Tim Willard, and I appreciate a chairman that runs a tight meeting, but I do think it's kind of unfair to make us have this restriction. We're just asking for a half hour, 45 minutes. This project's been before the city for almost 3 years. There's been a lot of money spent, a lot of effort spent, a lot of emotion, and I'm just not sure why the 20-minute rule has to be so strict. We're doing our best to comply. We appreciate the 3 minutes. We'd like maybe 5.
I'll take whatever I can get. I'm almost out of breath, though. Slide 15 from, I'm sorry, I'd like the specific, the opposition's presentation, not the opposition's attorney's presentation. I should have been more specific. I apologize.
You're going to have to be specific because we have 3 of them.
Well, they were put on the website as one, so it would be Janice Pinto's presentation, and the slide number may be off then.
It came in at 9:30 yesterday morning.
Yeah, this is it, but no, it's not going to be slide 15 in this. Can you go up? It's going to be the one that shows the fronts of her home. Up one more. Perfect, that's the one. So this is a slide off by Ms. Pinto, which shows where her property has already effectively widened Rodney Avenue by what appears to be 6 to 8 feet, which is in excess of the 3 feet that we would propose to do. This same condition exists on multiple parcels. You can drive down Rodney and see where multiple people have expanded the right-of-way. What's probably most shocking about kind of the response to the improvements on Rodney Avenue is the Rodney residents have been the most vocal opponents of this project, citing stormwater management concerns. And Rodney Avenue, as it's a pre-sort of code subdivision, has no stormwater management. We have offered minor, modest improvements to Rodney Avenue, a 3-foot widening, which apparently is okay, at least for Ms. Pinto to do. And it's done in multiple parcels. Modest with swales that are mowable and very non-obstructive. And it will alleviate stormwater management in a community that has no stormwater management. You know, they cite the Lewes code provisions that Lewes should maintain its internal communities. Well, the best way to maintain an internal community is to ensure it does not flood by providing a stormwater management system. So it's kind of shocking that there's so much resistance from people who are such proponents for stormwater management to even giving up, 3 feet of road, which they've already given up right here, as you see it on numerous other parcels, and a very modest swale that is almost not even noticeable and is completely mowable. They'll harp on us for stormwater management, but when it comes time for them to handle it for their own community, because again, these improvements on Rodney Avenue do not help Fishers Cove. They only serve the residents on Rodney Avenue. A swale inside of Rodney Avenue does not divert water from Fishers Cove. If you could go down to Ms. Pinto's presentation, I apologize, my slide numbers are off. I think it's going to be slide 15. And this slide could not do a better job of illustrating why widening Rodney Avenue for emergency vehicles is necessary. You want to say 18 feet alone is necessary. Well, already we've got cars that are 3 feet off the right-of-way, so in our scenario, they'd actually be on the road now. But you're going to have emergency vehicles go down there, and people routinely park. Go down Rodney Avenue on any day, and people are parked on the road. There's no way for emergency vehicles to get down there reasonably. And you know, the emergency access is for us and for Fishers Cove. It is for them. This is a completely unsafe situation here. If you could go up one more. I'm sorry, go up to, keep going, I'll tell you when my numbers are off, I apologize. Right here, this is another one that we're not really how we can make sure it heads and shoulders. I think that this was proffered to say, hey, we put improvements to the right of way so you can't do anything, and that Lewes approved it, but these are approvals from Genrec and what appears to be an invoice from a heating and air conditioning company. And what's even more surprising, so there is no proper approval from the city of Lewes. What's even more surprising though is when you look at the plan in the bottom left, they aren't even in the city's right of way. So it's kind of not understandable why that's in there. And the last slide I'd like to look at is 2 more up, I believe. And so this one just is, I mean, it's shocking. Frankly, it's beyond the pale to use a tragedy like this for personal gain. I think what we can all say what happened in Surfside was horrific and terrible. There's been a routine comment about this, that the stormwater management system is for some reason not going to be able to be managed by an HOA, and it's going to be incredibly costly and fall apart. And I think it's just completely untrue. And to use this in this way, it's just shocking, and it's frankly, it's disgusting. But beyond that, just to touch on the point of the finances of it, Fishers Cove is a very, very, very low-cost community from an HOA standpoint. A condominium community like Surfside has physical structures with massive improvements that are very expensive to maintain. When you look at Fishers Cove, there are no vertical structures other than a small house, pilot house on the river, or a small boathouse. The roads are maintained by the city of Lewes. There's no amenity, there's no clubhouse, there's no pool. So the cost to maintain the stormwater management system is low. And again, stormwater management systems are maintained by HOAs throughout the county and throughout the country. So the idea that we can't do it is just insane. And just, you know, some very, very, very brief closing remarks. You know, what we pointed out, we had less than 24 hours to look at this. This is a non-exhaustive list of all the falsehoods that are here. We're going to submit a written remarks about, you know, just more of the things that are completely wrong. The overarching theme, though, is the opposition is seeking to hold our application to a standard that is not in the code. The code is the standard that we must adhere to. They constantly talk about things, you know, sea level rise and this and that. We go by the code. If sea level rise is to be included in the analysis, which, by the way, we actually did include it in our analysis by working with Acom, it needs to be in the code. It needs to be amended by the Lewes Mayor and City Council, and it needs to be passed into law. If you all attempt to hold this application to a different standard than the code, that is not the call of this commission. And the parting words I'd like to leave you with is a Superior Court case. Eastlake partners with City of Dover. And what the court said here is that when people purchase land zoned for a specific use, they are entitled to rely on the fact that they can implement that use, provided the project complies with all the specific criteria found in the ordinances and subject to reasonable conditions which the Planning Commission may impose in order to minimize any adverse impact on nearby landowner or residents. To hold otherwise would subject a purchaser of land zoned for a specific use to the future whim or caprice of the commission by clothing it with the ability to impose ad hoc requirements of the use of land not specified elsewhere anywhere in the ordinance. The result would be the imposition of uncertainty for all landowners respecting whether they can safely rely on permitted uses conferred on their land under the zoning ordinance. You know, the record here is going to be absolutely clear, and it is absolutely clear because our expert witnesses, of which they have none on the opposition side, confirm this project meets code. To hold otherwise would be exactly what the Superior Court cautioned against in Eastlake, where they said to hold otherwise would subject a purchaser of land zone for a specific use to the future whim or caprice of the commission by clothing it with the ability to impose ad hoc requirements of the use of the land not specified elsewhere anywhere in the ordinance.
Mr. Willard.
So our call to the commission is just to follow the code, compare this application to the code, and not some nebulous standard that's proffered by the opposition. Thank you.
Right, we gave you more than twice what you asked for in addition, but I just want to remind you, while you would like to be talking longer tonight, you'll have more opportunities to submit written comments that will be reviewed by the commission and the public, which can be more detailed than you would have had even in 45 minutes tonight. So, Mr. Willard, I appreciate your work to get this through to us tonight. I look forward to getting additional information from you, but we're going to move on. Can we call up the attorney, the other attorney, please? lost him.
There he is.
There he
Good
is.
evening, this is Bill Verdunda, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent.
Please proceed, Bill.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the developer for going through many of my slides, so I can probably speed through them quicker because we stand by everything that's in those slides, so thank you, developer. My name is Bill Verdunda. I'm here on behalf of the concerned citizens of Rodney Avenue, Hornkill Avenue, and their friends. There's no doubt this is a very difficult piece of land to develop. This fact was easily discoverable even with a modicum of due diligence on part of the developer. The land is almost entirely in a 100-year floodplain, contains wetlands, has a high water table, has poor drainage conditions, and has experienced documented regular significant flooding events, and was the subject parcel of a comparable subdivision previously denied by City Council. When this project left off a year or more ago, this proposal was an absolute shambles. The applicant came forward and threw out so many different stormwater concepts, it was completely unclear what they were doing at that time. They've taken that time to submit a new plan, and they still failed to meet the legal standard that they should be required to meet. And this plan should absolutely be rejected because they have not taken the proper steps to make sure that the provisions of the Lewes Code have been adhered to. I'd like to go through my slide presentation fairly quickly here. The first slide is rejection by the Planning Commission in 2019, citing the issues previously stated, the stormwater management issue and the access issue. The remand letter to Mr. Willard reiterated that they had to focus on stormwater management and the AECOM flood model. As I mentioned just a moment ago, the applicant was all over the place with how stormwater was going to be handled. I think the last ditch effort previously was that the water would all be piped to the canal and dumped in there. But essentially, they know what the focus has been, and they know what the rules of the road are when it comes to what was required. The AECOM flood model has not been completed, and I don't believe this plan should go any further until the AECOM flood study, is fully completed. The remand letter talked about AECOM, and the remand letter talked about the Sussex Conservation District review of the Stormwater Management Plan. The developer came back in May of 2021 indicating that they had met the requirements that the city imposed on them. And that's the letter dated May 14. They attached a Duffield report dated May 14, where it seemed like the big focus was that we have the Sussex Conservation District approval. As I indicated earlier, and as I will go into more detail as we go further, the developers failed to address the issues that caused the previous projection. We disagree completely with the position of the developer that you should ignore the standards set forth in section 19773. I don't know why these sections would say maintain a natural drainage, minimize the impact of development on adjacent properties within and near the flood-prone areas, provide that flood storage and conveyance functions of the floodplain are maintained, minimize the impact of development on the natural and beneficial functions of the floodplain. They're in the code, and they're in the code for a reason. Those are the standards that have to be analyzed, and those standards were not analyzed. What the developer wanted to do was convince you that because the Sussex Conservation District approved their plan, that was satisfactory, and that's not the case. If I could just roll a few slides to the letter dated April 19, 2021 at the top. On this slide, the Conservation District reviewed the sediment and stormwater management plans and indicated they were approved, and the developer is hanging their hat on that. It's disingenuous for the applicant to come before you this evening and state that the Sussex Conservation District regulations control everything. The Sussex Conservation District covers more than just the beach communities, and that the provisions of the various municipalities still require a review and still require conformance by the applicant. It's seen that reliance on the Sussex Conservation District was going to be the explanation as they met the standard, but Jim Elliott, who actually issued the review letter, indicated that the Sussex Conservation District does not include a review for compliance with City of Lewes zoning ordinances, and that the Sussex Conservation District did not contain the provisions set forth in the City of Lewes ordinances related to the standards that I just stated. So those standards have not been reviewed, and we stand by the fact that they apparently have not been reviewed by anyone, and it sounds like the applicant believed intentionally did not have to review the standards that were in the code. We have emails that are current slide from Jim Elliott, where he basically confirmed as the plan reviewer for the Sussex Conservation District that they do not review plans for conformance and compliance to municipal and county codes or other ordinances. And that the sections that we cited were not reviewed by him in giving his approval. The next slide explains that very clearly in a letter dated May 24, 2021, where the Sussex Conservation District clearly states, and we highlighted this language that says, this plan approval pertains to compliance with the Delaware sediment and stormwater regulations. Please understand that the approval of this plan does not relieve you from complying with any and all federal, state, county, or municipal laws and regulations. And what we cited in our presentation are those very things to which there's been no adequate explanation. Our next slide cites those provisions, the standards set forth in section 19773. The developer is basically throwing his hands up and saying, that's impossible, we can't meet these standards. But those are the standards. And the City of Lewes is entitled to have their own standards. The City of Lewes is entitled to set a higher level of protection for its citizens. And that's what Chapter 197 of your zoning code calls for, a higher level of protection, which is certainly permitted under the laws of the state of Delaware. Again, this slide reiterates the provisions of the City of Lewes Code that the developer, it seems, candidly indicated he can't meet those requirements on this project. And then section 19773E3, no development activity that would affect the flood carrying capacity of the floodplain should be permitted, and we don't believe this plan can meet that requirement. The comp plan is law. The comp plan does matter, and the comp plan for the City of Lewes says that new floodplain development may not aggravate existing flood problems or increase damage to other properties. That's what your comp plan says. This plan violates your comprehensive development plan. And I think the developer candidly admitted that they cannot meet the requirements of section 19773. The next section, I have retaining walls. The retaining wall, obviously, in effect, just being in place would stop this plan from conforming with the requirements. It's altering the floodplain in an area that's in a special hazard district as determined by FEMA. You put a retaining wall at the end of that, you're diverting water, which is not permitted. And the question at the bottom of that page is, where is the water going? Next slide, you can see the floodplain. See the marsh. You can see the retaining wall. And obviously, if the retaining wall is designed to stop water from going someplace, that means the water that's going up against a retaining wall that can't go where it wants to go is going somewhere else. And that is not permitted under the Lewes Code and regulations. The next slide shows you the areas that have been designated by FEMA as special flood hazard areas, AE8 and AE7, which you see basically encompass the entire parcel The green is AE7, the yellow is AE8. Special flood hazard areas as determined by FEMA. I know the engineer thought it was funny when our question was, what happens when stormwater management ponds fill from storms? I think it's a pretty good question. What does happen when they fill? Because we know it's a high water table. We know that the water is going to fill, and where does it go there? It can't drain down into a water table that's right at the bottom of the stormwater system. Obviously, the answer is not a funny one. It can't go down into the stormwater system and then goes sideways and floods the area. There's no doubt that the system that was put in place here looks like it's fairly sophisticated. The question is, who's going to maintain it? What's it going to cost? And what will home buyers be told about that? And the next question is, how often will the stormwater management system be inspected by the city of Lewes to ensure it's functioning properly? I just want to briefly touch on AECOM in terms of that report. It's not a final report, and nothing should occur until that report is final. Typically, the AECOM findings would not be required under, they're not current, there's no current law regarding sea rise. I totally understand that. But previously in a public hearing, the applicant has indicated that it will comply with all AECOM recommendations, and the expectation is that a final report will issue by AECOM and that the developer will 100% be in compliance with that AECOM report. As indicated in our next slide, the developer does not say it will comply with the suggestions. Duffield notes has not seen a final report. I'm not sure what the final report where it stands at this time. There's questions regarding the AECOM's report assumptions and scenarios. There are only 2 difficult to read charts posted on the City of Lewes website. And both of those pictures shown on the City of Lewes website still appear to show flooding to neighboring properties. And you can look at the pictures on the next slide, and you can see the gold color, tan color that seems to be leaking around Fishers Cove. Well, that's a violation of the code provisions. And you can see the retaining wall on the left-hand photo, the part that juts into Fishers Cove. If there's a retaining wall there, the water has to disperse someplace. And where it's going to disperse is on neighboring properties. On JBM, they are the City of Lewis's engineer who reviewed this plan, and we do find fault with their effort here because they don't mention the AECOM report, which is pertinent based on the developer's representations that it will comply with the AECOM. JMB does not state the developer's plan complies with the City of Lewes zoning ordinances or comprehensive plans. JBM does not address flood storage capacity. JBM is the engineer for the city. JBM should be looking at section 197-73, looking at the standards and making sure there's compliance. But it's our position that JMB has failed its obligation to ensure the City of Lewes zoning ordinances and comp plan that we're complied with. They don't even mention any reference to any of those provisions that we cited in our position here. In terms of Rodney Avenue, I know I'm running short on time, but I think it's very important to point out that previously that access was denied by prior plan years ago to utilize Rodney for access. In this particular case, the developer has decided to essentially landlock himself. And I know the engineer ran in and raved that they can't do a compliant entrance. Well, they may need a variance, but they certainly could fit the access directly to Powelltown Road. But apparently they've foregone their opportunity. They gave up the opportunity themselves by selling the piece of land. They maintained an emergency access, but they simply did not want to create a road there. They want to use Rodney because that access at the beginning of their plan, perhaps it's an easier route, but they had a choice. They had a choice between selecting using Rodney for access and for using direct access to Powelltown Road. It's disingenuous for the developer to stand before you today and indicate that they should, because they sold their land and they denied themselves direct access to Powelltown Road, that they then should be permitted to use Rodney Avenue. As I stated in my presentation, it appears that there are a number of issues regarding the proposed roadway that are in conflict with the code, and we just ask that the city engineer review the issues that we've raised in our presentation regarding the overlay. I know other people will speak more specifically to the impact to the community and the homes that have been on Rodney for so many years. In terms of Rodney Avenue, as I indicated before, the city of Lewes rejected the plan in 1989 because the developer wanted to use Rodney Avenue for access. This developer had a choice and chose to sell the Pilot Town parcel with just an emergency access easement and not a road that could have been put in with a variance. There's still a question about fill in terms of how much fill is there. It's supposed to be zero net fill. There are a number of provisions in section 197, 73D5 regarding the floodplains that say disposal of fill shall not be permitted in special flood hazard areas. Section B, fill shall not be permitted to be placed for the purpose of supporting a building or structure, which appears to be violated in the proposed plan. And then further, it states that fill cannot be used in any way to adversely affect adjacent properties, which we believe it does by diverting water. But obviously building up land in one spot, the water they're diverting is going in a different direction. I'm not an engineer, but when I look at the plan, it talks about a cut of 7,300 square feet, but fill of 18,100 square feet. By simple math, it appears that that's an issue, but I'll leave that to an engineer for the city to determine if there is a no net fill when it appears that there's 11,000 feet of fill. Although perhaps that's in the non-floodplain portion of the property, which is very small, but certainly that needs to be explained better. There's also an issue about the soils, what types of soils are using, and what would be appropriate soils in that area. In terms of the fill, the developer's plan shows that fills needed to achieve finished grade at the houses that varies, but in some cases 4.5 feet. There are questions about whether there are crawl spaces or foundations to be built on top of the original grade, but certainly all of that has an impact on how the neighboring properties would be affected. So essentially, we stand by what we have in our PowerPoint because we're standing on correspondence from the Sussex Conservation District that says they did not review the pertinent provisions of the Lewes Code. The sections of the code we cited are directly out of the Lewes Code or the Lewes Comp Plan. So that's where we pull that information from. The developer, despite the failures of the last plan, have still not adequately addressed the issues by failing to address these same issues that we raised 2 years ago. I looked at my letter to the City Council that I issued before City Council took action on the last plan, and the issues that we raised then are the same exact issues we're raising today. The developer has failed to demonstrate compliance with the City of Lewes zoning ordinances and comprehensive plan, and we believe that in light of the failure to do so, that the Planning Commission should reject the developer's plan. I want to thank you for this time this evening.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks very much. All right, we have 3 others keyed up who have submitted PowerPoints. We will take them in order, 5 minutes each. My timekeeper, please keep us on track.
Joellen, you should be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. So good evening. I am Joellen Jordan, and I live at 123 Rodney Avenue. I've lived there since 2000. Before I go into what I was going to say with my PowerPoint, I'm going to say something from my heart. I felt in the presentation by the previous person before Bill Redunda, I felt that the verbiage was very aggressive. I have lived on Rodney Avenue since 2000, and the increase in traffic has been exponential since the proposal of Fishers Cove. There's been people riding motorcycles in the back of people's yards. There's been cameras put up in the fields, and it has not been a civil presentation. And as I said, I am speaking from my heart. This is a quiet neighborhood where everybody gets along, and I just felt very offended by that presentation. So that being said, I am now going to speak on behalf of the Rodney Avenue community, and I wish to extend my appreciation to each and every one of the commissioners for all you do for the city and the citizens of Lewes. We appreciate the opportunity you have provided to share our observations and concerns, and my comments will be specifically directed to the applicant's stormwater management plan and use of fill on the site. While I appreciate the fact that the Conservation District has approved the plan, the City of Lewes fortunately requires a more stringent responsibility on the part of the developer. The proposed homeowners association will later bear full responsibility for the proposed stormwater system, and the City of Lewes code specifically addresses the impact of development in the floodplain. Janelle, slide number 2, please. The purpose of Article 9, Environmental Protection Regulations 197-73, Floodplains Article 2, exist to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. And it states in D, K, and L, the irreversible actions and construction activities that concern us as adjacent property owners, and in fact, I believe many other residents throughout the City of Lewes. As written, D, maintain natural drainage. K, provide that the flood storage and conveyance functions of the floodplain are maintained. And L, minimize the impact of development on the natural and beneficial functions of the floodplain. Janelle, slide number 3, please. The construction of over 500 feet of retaining wall against the natural wetlands to the natural floodplain, while necessary to construct the proposed ponds to solve the runoff from the proposed site itself, seems counter to the intent of D, K, and L. Part J of the section of the code states that the purpose of its inclusion is reinforce that those who build in and occupy special flood hazard areas should assume responsibility for their actions. The fact that the proposed future homeowners association of these 18 homes will bear responsibility to maintain these facilities is deeply concerning, given that its long-term performance could impact the flooding of adjacent properties. The maintenance of not one, but 2 wet ponds and an additional 3rd dry pond will have considerable ongoing long-term expense. The most recent May 24th set of the Stormwater Management Plan, Sheet 11, provides the maintenance requirements. These lengthy operations and management instructions exist for a reason. Janelle, can you put on slide number 6, please? Thank you. The EPA's stormwater, wet pond, and wetland management guidelines state that maintenance is necessary for a stormwater pond or wetlands to operate as designed on a long-term basis. The pollutant removal, channel protection, and flood control capabilities of ponds and wetlands will decrease if sediment accumulates, reducing the storage volume, debris blocks the outlet structure, pipes or the riser are damaged, invasive plants take over and outcompete the planted vegetation, slope stabilizing vegetation is lost, or the structural integrity of the embankment, weir, or riser is compromised.
Joel, I'm going to give you a couple more minutes, but you're over your 5 already, so please try and summarize where the other points you want to make.
I'm closing out. Thank you, Drew. Will the proposed stormwater management system be adequately maintained by the proposed HOA? We trust that the LPC or MCC will endeavor to ensure that the developer and HOA, if approved, will provide robust funding to safeguard maintenance and its oversight. I hope this portrays to you why we, the residents and property owners on Rodney and Hornkill, have great concern, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your presentation.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak to the Commission tonight. My name is Rick Spitzborg, and I live at 122 Rodney Avenue. There was somebody at Mr. Willard's table earlier who said, gee, no one on those people who live on Rodney Avenue are professional engineers. Well, I'm among those people who is not a professional engineer, but this is not a professional conference tonight. This is a public hearing, and I think it's important that the Commission hear from the public. And I intend to speak specifically to the proposed changes to Rodney Avenue. It was at the November 14th, 2019 meeting that this Commission voted 8-1 to recommend that the Mayor and City Council reject the application for preliminary consent. One of those reasons, as cited in the minutes, was, and I quote, Rodney Avenue is a public road, and widening this road will impact property values of the 16 homes located on it by greatly reducing the setbacks, reducing off-street parking, and increasing traffic. And there you referenced City Code Section 17019E13. The rationale for your vote was further substantiated when the Commission wrote, and I quote now, the proposal to provide access to 18 new homes via a single access residential street appears inconsistent with adopted policies and ordinance provisions 170-27. The inconsistencies which you noted then some 20 months ago are not remedied in this revised application. The revised application continues to show a lack of compliance with City Code. The revised application is still defiant of the core values of the City of Lewes. This application adversely impacts the homeowners of Rodney Avenue in 2 major ways. First, by widening the roadway from 18 to 24 feet, and secondly, by imposing an unnecessary and unwelcome stormwater management plan on Rodney that would claw back an additional 18 feet of the right-of-way. On the widening of the roadway, I refer to the minutes of the April 13th, 2020 meeting of Mayor and City Council, and the minutes contain 2 quotes from the discussion on the vote and the remand. The first quote is, "The city needs to see how minimal the changes could be to Rodney Avenue." And the second quote is, "It is important to see whether the current paved area can be improved, but not widened," unquote. I believe the city engineer has provided a response to council in the report which identifies alternatives to bring Rodney to code, one of which is replace at existing width with current pavement specs. That would retain the current 18-foot roadway. Regarding the stormwater management on Rodney, the plan shows 2 9-foot drainage swales on both sides of the roadway. The swales are not a part of the Fishers Cove Stormwater Management System. They are an external system intended to capture and remove rainwater off of Rodney. The applicant, I guess, would have you believe that this is a gift to us, providing us a benefit of stormwater management. But we don't have a stormwater problem. Such a problem would only occur as a consequence of widening Rodney Avenue, because that would increase the impervious surface in the right-of-way by 40%. It would destroy the hedges, the ground covers, and the trees that absorb rainwater. Simply stated, the current width of Rodney Avenue negates any need for swales. If this proposal were adopted, it would reduce the distance from our front property lines to the line of disturbance by 75%, from 16 feet to 4 feet. It would deny the residents of Rodney the enjoyment they have derived from their properties for 4 generations. The proposal would subject Rodney Avenue homeowners to restrictive use of the right-of-way that has not been imposed to the residents on other streets in the city of Lewes. The applicant is asking the city to be arbitrary and selective in applying right-of-way standards. I want to say that a discussion limited to engineering specs and code provisions dehumanizes the impact of this proposal. The slides I'm about to show you demonstrate how harmful the suggested widening of the street would be for me and my neighbors. Janelle, would you please show the first photo?
Rick, you're already at 5 minutes. I'll give you a couple more minutes, so please focus on the highest priority ones for you.
Thank you. You can see the crime scene tape. That is where the roadway and the swales would extend to. And the people who now on their porch enjoy their garden would be enjoying a ditch and water. Next slide, very quickly. There's the same house. Whoops, there goes the parking. Next slide, please. This is Janice Pinto's house. He forgot to mention that the view down forgot to include the swales. So where you see the tape, it takes it all the way up to there, destroying the trees, the lighting, etc. Next slide, please. Another view. And the final slides are my house. This is a garden that we planted 20 years ago, destroyed. Next slide. The driveway that we put in to be at grade with the road, destroyed. Next slide. The 40-year plus hedges that were there when we bought the property in 1980, gone. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to summarize and say that the final reason, the fundamental reason why this commission denied preliminary consent in 2019 has not changed. Even if you conclude that the revised application addresses other remands, the harm to Rodney Avenue remains. The applicant's proposal is contemptuous to your guidance. It's appalling to us that the applicant is asking you to violate the core value of our city, namely that Lewes recognize and maintain its internal communities. The Rodney Avenue community asks that you sustain the decision made in November of 2019 and again recommend that this application be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Can we go to the third, please?
So Janice, we see you in the participants twice. So we brought one, Janice Pinto, onto the panel. Are you here? Yeah. Oh, good. There you are.
Janice, please go ahead.
Okay, Janelle, could you put my slides up, please? Okay, thank you and good evening. I'm Janice Pinto, and Janelle, I'm going to ask you for your help. Would you advance the slide, please? So the road ahead, Fishers Cove development is not a by right development. This is a very vulnerable, environmentally sensitive area at the southern end of the Canary Creek Basin. Directly above us is Harbor Point development with 11 foot of fill. Janelle, next slide, please. The developer proposes widening of Rodney from 18 to 24. So this is Rodney using a 50-foot right-of-way with 9-foot swales. Next slide, please. From the overhead here of the east end of Rodney, you can see the red is the road and the blue is the 50-foot right-of-way. And the next slide, please, shows the west end of Rodney from above. Next slide, please, Janelle. Residents of Rodney are not red and blue lines. We are not right-of-ways. We are not limits of disturbance. This is a 4-generation neighborhood of good people who are proud of the core values of Lewes. Next slide, please. So in that red box, you'll note the arrows that change direction. That indicates the change of the flow of water. Who is going to be responsible for maintaining the pitch in that ditch so that the water flows east to the canal and then west to the wetlands? Who's responsible for that? Next slide, please. Surfside, Florida tells us we can expect HOAs to handle garbage collection, leaves, snow removal from streets, but we cannot realistically expect, according to them, condo boards and HOAs to prevent damage from sea level rise, more frequent storms, and other major changes to the environment. Thank you. Next slide, please. This crime scene tape indicates the right-of-way to be retrieved by the developer. Next slide, please. The City of Lewes, through DENREC, approved the geothermal wells to be in the right-of-way at our house, 112, and also 123 on Rodney. They were approved, they were put in. So who's going to maintain those geothermal wells? Next slide, please. So to review, the City of Lewes is being asked to retrieve its 50-foot right-of-way from a 4-generation neighborhood, not to benefit the city, nor the Rodney residents, only to benefit the developers, Shell, Healy, and Tice. If this can happen on Rodney, it can happen anywhere. Look across the city on both sides of the Savannah Bridge. And if it only happens on Rodney, then it indeed is selective enforcement. Next slide, please. There's also the issue of watering up. This is the rising of the water table due to the removal of trees. Next slide, please. 70% of the trees are to be removed on the Fishers Cove site. This will result, according to Tom McKenna, Associate Professor, Department of Geological Sciences, it will result in anywhere between 3 and 21-inch rise in the water table. Next slide, please. On Rodney Avenue alone, we have a watering up issue that would be dramatic by the removal of mature trees. Next slide, please. Rodney would lose all its mature trees, increasing then the water table on Rodney. Next slide, please. Further indication of trees that would be lost. Next slide, please. We are interested in sustainable development in the floodplain. That means reforestation. Irresponsible development, which this is in the floodplain, is deforestation. Next slide, please. We need the floodplain intact to do what it was designed to do. Floodplains allow wetlands to migrate. When you look at that wall, interesting that they have 286 and then 299, and I'm not great with math, but I think that's about 685 as a concrete length of wall. But that doesn't go completely around the wetlands. So as water rises, where's all that water going to go? Well, most likely Hornkill. Next slide. The Acom flood model for Fishers Cove has more questions than answers. And this was handled very, very well by Bill Redunda. So we're going to move ahead. Please, let's go beyond the next slide. Thank you. And beyond the next slide. So our issue is flooding. It hasn't changed. This is a view from Hornkill. Next slide, please. This is Hornkill looking into the Great Marsh, February 1, 2021. Next slide, please. This is actually looking at lots 4 through 7 in Fishers Cove. This is running water from Superstorm Sandy. When the water came through with a surge, that's the water where lots are supposed to go. Next slide, please. Flooding, and we've mentioned this to previous LPC groups. Flooding at 112 was a very costly proposition and a very scary proposition at our house. When the floor came up because of hydrostatic pressure, bending a support beam, this required new beams, new columns, and quite scary. Next slide, please. So the surge we all live with because of where we live. The danger is not the ocean or the bay or the canal, it is the marsh. And you can see on this where water comes in through Roosevelt Inlet. You can see where the University of Delaware is. It comes up through Canary Creek. There's the Great Marsh Preserve, and it goes around filling the lagoon, and it comes back because that's what it's supposed to do.
Janice,
Fishers Cove, which is that star, is right in the way.
Janice, you're already 3 minutes over your time. Could you wrap it up in 1 minute, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can we go to the next slide, please? And the last slide. This proposal, according to science, will place the health, safety, and welfare of many of the residents of the city of Lewes at a much greater risk. It threatens our lives, families, and property value. It is a blatant disregard for the citizens and the Do No Harm statute. You must deny. And we thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Janice. Anne Marie, do we have others queued up?
There's one more hand up. Can you? Oh, Oh, it's Janice. So right now, we do not have any additional hands up.
Do we have others who wish to speak?
Not at this time.
Shocking. For those of you who are joining us tonight, please raise your hand or otherwise let us know if you wish to speak, because we will adjourn the public hearing if we do not have additional speakers. We expected many more. Gentlemen in the audience.
Can I come forward?
Yes, please. Identify yourself by name and address, please.
And then we do have one more when,
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Neil Schister, 314 Mulberry Street, a resident of Lewes since 2009, author of the book Living Lewes, an insider's guide, author of Revealing Rehoboth, a professional journalist and a citizen. I'm here simply as a citizen who feels that it's incumbent on the city, which I've come to love, to make a stand against the implications of global warming and rampant development. That's what I want to say. I'm here simply because I'm supporting the folks who are opposing this. I don't know any of them, but I simply want to say it's incumbent on us to start making stands on what we're all looking at. And there's more important things here than money. Thank you.
Thank you. You have someone else queued up?
There's
Two.
okay, Mr. Nelson, you should be able to turn on your camera and unmute.
Thank you, and there we are. Sorry for the lighting. My husband and I are new homeowners at 582 Pilottown Road, watching with great interest the property sort of kind of right behind our home, and frankly, the concerned and interested in why what's called to us the Lewes Alley between our home and the home next to us that runs from Pilottown Road well back to close to Fishers Cove. Why that is indicated in green, I don't understand that to be part of the official parcel, but part of the informal Lewes Alley system. And so I'm hoping someone can explain that to us. Thank you.
Not tonight, but I'll ask Janelle to take a look at that.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Are there any other persons wishing to speak?
Okay, Mr. Schoen, you've been brought onto the panel, so you should be able to turn on your camera and unmute.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Randy Schoen, and I'm a resident at 129 Rodney Avenue. I really am called to speak because I don't want to be one of those people that don't show up. But I couldn't be more supportive of the presentations of my neighbors and my friends who really are a very special group of people, and I think they represent the energy of Lewes, Delaware itself. I've owned my home for 22 years. I'll probably be buried in the backyard. There's nothing more close to my heart than that house and my friends. And I don't think there's anything I could add to what they've said today, except my sincerest emotion that development is just out of control. And we do have to think about the long term, whether we're going to be there to inherit it or the next generation. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Hope to see you in person. Thank you.
Any other hands up? Okay.
Hey, Bob Stern, we are bringing you over to the panel, and then you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera.
Hi, this is Bob Stern. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Again, thank you for hearing me. My name is Bob Stern. I live at 600 Pilottown Road. Have owned this house for less than 3 years, but consider it a privilege and an honor to live here. My wife and I, although recent occupants of this house, have really come to love this area for a variety of reasons, not just because of the natural beauty of it, but also because of the natural beauty, frankly, of the people who live here. And I really just wanted to make a couple of points. My apologies if I stumble through them because I had no prepared remarks, but I'll make them quickly. Number one, I am very concerned about the impact selfishly of the development on my own property. When I saw the red lines through the houses and their yards, as exhibited in today's presentations, one of the homes I saw was my own. At the corner of Rodney and Pilottown, we have a lighthouse that people have come to know and love. In fact, the day after I bought this house, several people approached me and said, whatever you do, don't take down that lighthouse. All of our friends use it as a landmark to find our home and turn on Rodney. That lighthouse will disappear, as will the parking in front of my garage, because I will not be able to fit a car in the parking area, which of course concerns me selfishly. More broadly, in terms of the community, although I've only been here for 3 years, I've had the pleasure of meeting many people who have been here for many years, and I have seen the impacts that this widening of the road will have on all of their properties and all of the hard and beautiful work that they have done to their yards, which I enjoy every time I stroll down Rodney, which will simply be taken away from them. And finally, I'm certainly no storm management expert, but it doesn't take a genius to see this is going to have a bad impact on the neighborhood and the surrounding areas. When you take stormwater and send it someplace it wasn't supposed to go, it naturally has an impact. Things like concrete walls that redirect stormwater or hold it back are a poor substitute for allowing the water to drain the way that it's supposed to drain. And I can't help but think someday all of the residents of this area are going to pay the price for a developer's decision to purchase an at-risk area and then try to transfer that risk to the surrounding participants. I don't have any problem with responsible development, but what I heard today was a developer whose professionals, although I'm sure they are smart and they know what they're talking about, spend as much time attacking the statements and the views of people who oppose them as actually presenting their views, which I find, frankly, as an attorney, to be rather unprofessional, because those of us who practice in the legal field know it's one thing to attack your opponent's ideas, it's another thing and a poor substitute to attack your opponents. And I saw way too much of that from the developers' professionals today. So in summary, I would simply say, thank you for hearing me. I do feel that this development will be destructive of a neighborhood which has been here for quite some time. Again, undertaken by a developer who took on a known risk. That was their judgment when they bought that property. They have not taken the appropriate steps to mitigate that risk. In fact, what they're really doing is transferring that risk to us. They'll finish their project, they'll make their profit, and then they'll go away and leave us to deal with the problems. So I would respectfully suggest that this is a poor project and it should not be approved. Thank you for your time and for hearing from me.
Thank you, Bob.
So right now, we have no other hands raised.
There was one, but there was
Second or third call. Anyone else wish to be heard tonight at our public hearing?
Oh, we have Jenny Keith is being brought over to the panel. So, Miss Keith, you should be able to turn on your camera and unmute.
Thank you.
Tell your address.
Right. I live at 9 Massachusetts Avenue in Lewes, and I have many different reactions to all the different things we've heard, but there are just a couple of things I would like to say. One, chiming in with the previous speaker, to hear my neighbors and residents, long-term residents, my neighbors, my friends on Rodney Avenue, called liars and insane, to me weakens the arguments that are being made against them. I found that very, just really inappropriate. Also, the one thing among the many other things that people have brought up that really stuck with me is the idea that the management of this stormwater system and the ponds that would be protective is in the hands of a homeowners association. Seems to me just a stupendous dereliction of responsibility by the developers. I mean, that's not the kind of responsibility that people get elected or chosen or volunteered to be on an HOA board. It's just not, I felt like that was absolutely, we'll do what we want and then we'll get out of here. That felt very irresponsible to me. So I appreciate your listening and appreciate very much this kind of open opportunity for all of us to hear and say what we think. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, very much. Appreciate it. Any other hands raised?
Yes.
Deborah.
Yeah, here we go.
Shall I?
Oh, one more. Barbara Curtis. And so Barbara Curtis is being brought onto the panel. Ms. Curtis, you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera.
Hi, I'm Barbara Curtis. I live at 17 Ship Carpenter Square. I love the city of Lewes. I've been here for 11 or 12 years now, and I'm frightened about what's happening with development in this city, the city I love. I read the other day that Delaware is likely to lose about 10% of its landmass by the turn of the century because of global warming and sea level rise. And I've also read independently that the wetlands and the marshes are the way to slow down the sea level rise and the climate change effects. I'm an environmental scientist, and I agree that this is the way to go. What is happening, what is being proposed for the Fishers Cove development will affect our wetlands and ultimately will affect everything that happens in the city of Lewes if the commission doesn't turn this down. I see the future of the city as pretty bleak if we don't address global warming and if we don't do something about this development that occurs with no consideration of impact on the environment. And I fully support everything that the Rodney citizens said. They are so spot on. And, you know, I live in an area that's pretty well protected, but I don't want to see this happening to my city. I thank you for that.
Thank you, Barbara. Apparently, we have one more coming.
Thierry Poire, you're being brought onto the panel, and then you will be able to turn on your camera.
Okay, I think I've been able to unmute. I'm not sure if you hear me. Maybe, Mr. Panetta, can you raise your hand if you can hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
Okay, so maybe I have to do this. Well, listen, okay, I think now you can see me. Okay,
Yes.
Good. All right. At least I can see myself. What I found
Please identify yourself and your address,
okay.
sir.
Yes, Thierry Poirier. I live at 19 Harborview Road. What I thought was very concerning in the presentations that have been made today is that I haven't heard any clear explanation as to where the water that is going to be diverted from the property because of the retention wall that is being built, where is that water really going to go? I've heard a lot of speculations as to where it goes, but isn't there somewhere a clear plan? Isn't the developer supposed to calculate, the mass of water, the volume, and tell us exactly where that water is going to go? And the second thing is how, if somebody could explain, how is the impact of other developments in the area taken into consideration? Recently, the city approved development of the waterfront preserve, which is a property located on New Road. We know that on the so-called Broom Church property, and they've changed their name now, I don't know what they call themselves, but 290 houses or something like this are going to be built, and this is just about a mile away, maybe, from Fishers Cove. It is in county, so all this development is going to create a mass of water, which is going to come down the marsh and through Canary Creek, and going to increase tremendously, I think, the quantities of water that will have to be absorbed somewhere. And I don't see any study of the interface between what is being done in the county and the tons and tons and tons of fill that are being added. For instance, on the Groom Church property, we can see it today because if you drive on New Road, you can already see that the elevation compared to what it was is probably something like already 10 feet. We can expect maybe something similar, I don't know, on the waterfront preserve, because on the waterfront preserve, the work is not begun and it's still a cornfield at this point. But at least on the Groom Church property, you can see that there's going to be a tremendous amount of elevation created, and that water is going to have to go somewhere. It can only go downhill, which means towards us and towards the Fishers Cove property, which is the appendix through which normally it would be flowing. So it seems to me that at this stage, while I hear that things have been studied, I, as a member of the public, feel like I don't have any information as to where this water is going to go, and I would like this to be studied before the Commission actually makes a recommendation one way or another. It seems to me like the arguments that are being developed are strictly legal arguments, but they are not really physical arguments of water flows. So that's what I wanted to do, and I hope that you will delve onto this aspect maybe a little bit further. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Sorry.
So Elaine Zimmerman is the next speaker, so she will be able, Elaine, you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera.
Okay, I'm Elaine Zimmerman. I live at 418 West 4th Street. I've spoken on this project before. The two things that come to my mind, recently, the previous speaker spoke about making decisions so much related to legal reasons. And I think that really is something to think about. We do seem to make an awful lot of city decisions on for legal reasons. And rising seawater is really more of a scientific thing. I wonder whether the Planning Commission has ever thought of suggesting to City Council and to the governing people, getting the University of Delaware involved, getting the scientists involved, some of the people who are we're very fortunate to have our university here, the master's program in marine studies and other things. Really what I'm saying is that this decision maybe should go further in terms of the expertise that you're gathering, not just legal. And I agree with that. The previous speaker brought that up, and I thought about it, and I think that's a good thought. And what Jenny just said about homeowners associations making, governing these water flows and things, that makes sense to me as well. Again, maybe there should be a scientific board or somebody that's got the expertise in the water and the engineering and all of this, that maybe not just for one development, that for all developments that come in now into our city at a time when we are really experiencing provable seawater rise. This is a new world, and maybe it shouldn't all be based on old laws. That the legal framework may not be able to handle this. Maybe we who have very good legal scientific expertise in town ought to turn to that expertise. The second thing I wanted to say is what I said initially, and that is that one of the core values of Lewes is to respect its individual neighborhoods. And Rodney Avenue has been here as long as I've been here, has been here forever. I've known people that have moved away. They are so discouraged. They have reached into their pocketbooks and spent good money. They are trying as hard as they can. They should be respected in this. And I feel very much the way Jenny said on that this is a group that's really in danger. And to have not only the danger of flooding, but the danger of the cars being hit and expanding their roadway, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, would change their neighborhood. And that is something our core values really restrict. So I am hesitant about this. In fact, I'm against it.
Thank you, Elaine.
Got another hand up, so. He's already spoken, though. No, but you're not allowing people to speak a second time, right? Okay.
If you've already spoken once, respectfully, you need to submit written comments to follow up. We're only going to allow individuals to speak once tonight. All right, seeing no further hands up, I'm going to close this hearing by reminding everyone that we will accept written comments by close of business Friday, July 30th. We appreciate all of the persons who have spoken tonight, taking the time and forethought to contribute. We look forward to getting additional information from the concerned citizens and from the applicant. The matter will be considered in our meeting in August for the first time under the renewed application, the revised application after the remand. We will be, at that time, trying to address some of the questions that the commissioners have, perhaps many of the ones that have been raised tonight, but it'll all be done in the public meeting, and we will render a decision, as I said at the beginning, within 90 days from tonight. Our decision will be a recommendation to Mayor and City Council, who have the final authority to address the approval or not of the proposed development. And we will be endeavoring to aid the Mayor and City Council in reaching the best decision for the City of Lewes as we explore all of the various factors and issues not only been raised tonight, but that the Commission has raised previously. So with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and thank you all very much. I must say I'm shocked.
But there were more.
There weren't more.
That's what when we talked earlier today, that's
I
what it
expected
was.
we'd be here till 9 or 10 o'clock. I'm
That's-
shocked.
That's why I suggested we cut it off.